Well, I just want to welcome everybody to the 62nd HR Network Breakfast. We're delighted that you're here. We really appreciate you sharing some of your morning with us. We've got a fantastic program today. We've got two outstanding speakers, and I'm really excited. As most of you know by now, we start our seminars with an audience poll, and hopefully you've all found your way to a device. We are here to talk about social media today, so we're going to ask a series of questions that are related to that topic and sort of establish a pulse for where the audience is. And I just want to reiterate the fact that all of your responses are anonymous, so the device doesn't know who you are. So let's get started with the questions. Okay, who's the jokester? Lindsay, I knew it was you. Okay, slipping a slide that wasn't supposed to be in here. Although, actually, there is a little bit of a resemblance with the beard. No? Not at all? Okay, well, not everybody can be the most interesting man in the world, so I guess my charm is not so contagious that a vaccine had to be invented. All right, so let's press forward. Now, remember that as far as keying in your answer, you simply press and release the number on the keypad associated with your choice, and then you'll see the number show up in the keyboard's display, followed by the word received. If you change your mind about your answer, it's not a problem. Simply respond again, and the system will only accept your final answer. Okay, so our first question is, and we're just going to start with three questions that are the baseline questions about labor market conditions. Drawing on your own network, how do you expect the job market to develop? The consensus of professional forecasters is predicting that the unemployment rate will average 6.4% this year. It's actually below that right now at 6.3%. Where do you guys stand? Do you think it's likely to be a weaker job market than what the experts are predicting? The consensus feels about right, or it's likely to be stronger than predicted? Okay, so this is, I think, a bullish development, because as I've been asking this question of this audience over the last 9 months or so, generally the group's been more cautious than the consensus. So I'm going to interpret this as a slightly bullish indication. Our next question is a little bit less about the macro and a little bit closer to home and more specific to your organization. So relative to the April timeframe, is your organization hiring at an accelerated rate, hiring at a similar pace, remaining stable, conversely slowing its hiring, starting a downsizing, or downsizing at an accelerated rate? Okay, this is interesting, because this represents a continuation of the deceleration that you guys reported in April. In September and January, there was really an acceleration, and last quarter, the ratio that we look at, which is basically hiring versus sort of downsizing, looks now like in favor of slowing hiring or downsizing, so that's interesting. So at a macro level, you seem slightly more bullish, but when you look in your own organizations, not as much. And let's see if I can Okay, here we go. So our last baseline question, also relative to April, how has the environment changed for retaining your top talent? Is it easier to retain them, about the same, or harder to retain and perhaps attract? Okay, so I wouldn't say that things are ratcheting tighter. Last quarter, you guys, I know it hasn't been that long since we've been asking that question, but last quarter, 55% of you actually said it was harder to retain, and this number is pretty similar, so still a very tough market from the standpoint of top talent. Okay, so let's move on now to the questions that pertain to today's discussion about social media. The first question is, which best describes your company's status with regard to enterprise social technology? You are already a Citrion customer. You do utilize enterprise social technology from a provider other than Citrion. You've investigated the technology but haven't implemented it yet. Or to your knowledge, you have not taken the step of investigating it yet. Okay, so I know that your answers are going to make Nancy happy because she has an opportunity to introduce you guys to some pretty interesting stuff. Next question is, which choice best describes your attitude towards social technology use in organizations? The upside for the organization far outweighs the downside risk. Pretty neutral on the topic. I understand its usefulness, but there's way too much downside risk. Or perhaps you don't feel like you know enough. Okay, so this is pretty encouraging. I think this is going to make Nancy happy, but also provide an opportunity for Francine to help you, to protect you guys. This is sort of like we have the angel and the devil here on everybody's shoulders. The devil saying, use social media in your organization, and now both speakers are angels. Don't get me wrong. I was not. Next question is, do you allow your employees to access social media for their personal use through your company computers? Yes or no? Okay, I'm actually quite surprised. I thought it was going to go the other way. Next question is, how confident are you that your social media policy is legally sound? We don't have a social media policy yet. Not at all confident, somewhat confident, very confident. Okay, so for those that have a social media policy, there's a lot of reasonably confident people. Okay, almost done. Have you taken disciplinary action against an employee for their improper use of social media? Yes or no? Okay. Only a third of you has, but that is not an insignificant number. Okay. For your employees who have been tasked with marketing your organization on social media, do you have a written agreement or policy regarding who owns the social media accounts that they use for this purpose? Yes, no, or we don't actually yet have employees acting in this capacity. Okay, about 50-50 for those of you that have the policy in place. And the last question we're going to ask is with regard to confees or non-compete agreements. Do those agreements typically reference the employee's social media use in particular? Yes, no, or not yet applicable? Okay, something to think about, and I'm sure something that Francine might have a thing or two to say. So thanks everybody for participating in the polling. In a few minutes, our panelists are going to have an opportunity to interpret some of the feedback that you've given them. As you know, we're here to talk about the role of social media in the workplace, and we're going to hear from Nancy Gill about how the use of that technology can drive employee engagement, and we're going to hear from Francine Esposito about some of the things that you need to consider to protect yourself from the downside of giving your employees that much freedom. The thing I wanted to talk about briefly is the connection between social media and employee engagement and the job seeker. Social media-based hiring is clearly on an upswing, and the foot soldiers in this revolution are engaged employees. We actually just came back from a half-day program that was put on by LinkedIn, and the topic was building talent brands. Perhaps some of you were there. Show of hands, anybody? Okay. I'll tell you that our biggest takeaway is that employers are learning to view engaged employees as their best and most cost-effective talent brand emissaries. And they are gradually empowering those employees to promote their talent brand using social media. This is not an easy step to take, but some of the companies that we heard from are actually providing training to their employees, and not just training on how to say happy things, but how to promote targeted jobs in very targeted places. And to us, that means that the role that forums like the LinkedIn groups are going to play in the future in terms of recruiting is clearly poised to grow sharply. So when we talk about the 5 o'clock club having a research-based approach to outplacement, this is really what we're talking about. You know, when we attend events such as that, we attend as an employer, but we also attend as an advocate for the job seeker. And by the way, to my knowledge, we were the only firm of our kind that was at that meeting, and not because we snuck in. We didn't sneak in. We were invited to the meeting. And by the way, when I'm talking about posting or job postings, it's actually job discussions that we're talking about in this context. And it's an opportunity for the job seeker that's well positioned in some of these groups to connect on a peer-to-peer basis, which we would argue is always better than sort of a blind application. Understanding this, we make it our mission to encourage our clients as part of their personal marketing plan to get into relevant groups, and even better, to take a participating role in those groups. And getting our clients over the hump and getting them to overcome their reservations, getting them to understand that not everything is Facebook, and then really providing the training so they don't shoot themselves in the foot is an essential part of our role. Having a research-based approach, and by that we essentially mean that we focus on helping the individual to work on the things that we know work and avoid the things that we know don't work in a job search context. This is really one of the fundamental pillars of our outplacement model, one of the 3 R's, if you will. And in conjunction with our acclaimed methodology, i.e. the roadmap, and our relationship-based coaching, as opposed to call center coaching, our approach to outplacement continues to gain fans. And for that, we want to thank our more than 400 corporate outplacement clients, particularly those that are represented in this room. And as always, our commitment to you is that our packages will have the most guaranteed private coaching hours per dollar spent in the industry. All of our packages are a minimum of 1 year in length, which is enormously comforting to the individual, and that no one you refer to us will ever feel like just a number. And by the way, we do all of that at a cost that is favorably comparable to the much shorter term packages of some of our peers. Just one note of housekeeping before we march ahead. Please make sure to fill out your blue forms. There's a blue form in each of your folders, and they're blue. And you know, we want to know if you'd like to talk business with us, if you have great ideas for topics at future breakfasts, and I think this is actually one of your ideas from past seminars. And we want to know if we can help to the extent that you're in transition. Your feedback is very important to us. I also want to note that our next breakfast seminar is on September 19th, and the topic is the abnormalities of the post-Great Recession labor markets. And we're going to cover this from an economic perspective and an academic perspective. It's going to be very interesting. Great. So now I want to introduce today's moderator, Celia Curran. Celia is a master coach and an executive coach with the 5 O'Clock Club. Before joining us, she had a very successful career as an executive in the media and publishing industry, and later as an entrepreneur. She's also the author of one of my favorite quotes about our business, which, as you can see, is prominently displayed on the screen. Not only is Celia the moderator today, she also happens to be the coach of today's job reporter, and I'm going to let Celia introduce the job reporter, but I would just say that there's no better advertisement for our business than hearing a great success story such as that of Nancy Roberson's. So, Celia, thank you.
Good morning. It's with real pleasure that I introduce Nancy Roberson this morning, who was in my group for 11 sessions. She started coming to us in November of 2013, came consistently to the Monday night groups, and we are so proud of what she's done. So Nancy, take it away.
Thank you and good morning. As Celia pointed out, well, she didn't mention this, but I've been in the publishing business for a long time. I dare not say how many years, but I've been around the block, okay? And I'm glad to say that after my experience at the 5 O'Clock Club, I am currently employed as the president and publisher for a very established publishing division here in New York City. So that's very good. The thing I wanted to just share with you briefly is how my experience at the 5 o'clock club helped me land this position. And as you might know, publishing has been in a very, it's been a tough road out there. And unfortunately, about 4 years ago, after working in a company for a long, long time, we had a major downsizing. So I was faced with an outplacement, going to an outplacement situation at that time. And my experience at the 5 o'clock club has been the exact opposite of my experience from being an executive in this big company, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so when I came to the 5 o'clock club, I thought, oh, I know all this. I know all of this. You know, it's just like, okay, I'm in publishing, great books. So, you know, I flipped through them and, you know, well networked, you know, had a pretty good resume, all of that stuff. But when I started coming, I used every session as a personal checklist. I might have known a lot about one thing, but, you know, oh, that's something that I can use, whether it was, you know, how to respond in letters and so on and so forth. So I really, I buckled down, and if I knew it, fine. If I didn't, I would just go through my checklist on all of the presentations. The second thing was the relationship I had with my personal coach, Celia, and we later determined that we're actually sorority sisters from 2 different parts of the world, if you can believe that. But you know, having been experienced, every now and then, I confess, I copped an attitude, like, I can't believe these people aren't getting back. How do these people run these companies and, you know, with their communication? And, you know, being an experienced professional, I was starting to think, I'm never going to find another job. I'm too old. So I would go lean on my coach, and she would, you know, help me get through all of this stuff. And the relationship with the personal coach is fabulous within the 5 o'clock club. Very different than my experience prior. But I have to say, the third component of the club for me that I really, really felt like I had a lot of takeaways was the small group interactions. The people sitting around the table every Monday night, and you could hear what their experiences were, how, oh man, I can help them in the discussion, and then you picked up on tips. I gotta say that ultimately, sitting at that table helped me land the job I have now. I had applied for this particular job. One of my colleagues around the table knew somebody else that had applied for the same job. Oh my God. And so I got to keep it on track because of what the other person was hearing every day. Long story short, I got the job. So I was all ears. But I must say that I really, really endorse their methodology in terms of those 3 key components. You know, all of the publications, the presentations, the personal coaching, and that small group interaction made a huge difference for me, and I thank you for that.
Well, I have a couple comments on Nancy to follow up here. She had an incredibly successful search, and she made it happen. This woman has tenacity. She does not take no for an answer. She just keeps charging ahead, and that made all the difference in this particular search. But when I think of her, I do think about the small groups, which are a key part of our methodology. And it's a group of colleagues that are around the table, and they really get committed to each other. It's always a fascinating night, but some nights are almost magical. And the commitment to each other that goes on in that group is unbelievable. Nancy was a major contributor. She was candid and thoughtful about her own challenges and her own frustrations, which was very helpful to the group. She listened very thoughtfully, and she gave very generously to her colleagues. And the group really believes that this generosity of spirit and her ability to always think outside the box is going to bode well for her new job. And I bring her from her group best wishes and Godspeed. So on with the program, which came from your suggestions for programs, and we have two wonderful speakers here today, so let's get on with it. It's really going to be a little yin and yang, and they can't decide which one's the angel and which one's the devil, so we'll let you all decide that. We're going to hear first from Nancy Gill, who's the Chief People Officer at Citrion, and who started her career at People Express, was Senior VP of HR at the National Football League, which was actually a very good background to becoming a managing director at Chase, JP Morgan Chase. And now she's in an entrepreneurial startup and has, well, they're not too much of a startup anymore, but she's got some fun stories on that too. So take it away.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Nancy Gill, and yes, I would be the devil in Darren's example. Thank you. Nice to meet all of you in the networking session and as you came in today, and I'm just really so glad to be here with you this morning and glad that you came to talk about social. And as Darren said, I'm pretty happy about the results because there really is a learning opportunity here for everybody today. And really, my mission is to really make sure that you walk away understanding more about how social and collaborative technology works inside of companies. And if you walk away going back to investigate what's happening in your company right now on this front, or even if you just start reading some things and maybe using social a little bit differently, then this will have been a success in my view. So we're all learning together. I like to say that I'm on my way to being a social evangelist. I'm on my way. I don't think anybody is really, truly an expert quite yet, but I'm certainly trying. I brought a colleague along with me today, Paul Liddy, who's in the front row, because he is a lot closer to being an expert. So hopefully you can help with some questions a little bit later. Now, I'm going to go immediately off my script, okay? I'm going to talk about me for a few minutes here, and I do want to start right away by saying I do not have permission to use some of these logos, okay? Now, JP Morgan is a big client of ours at Citrion, and actually, I was at JP Morgan. That's how I met Citrion. The NFL, I will say something about that logo because everybody wants to know about the NFL. So I was actually part of the design team in what you see here, which is the new logo. And I always love to point out that the stars never meant anything on the NFL shield. If you look back in history, now they represent the divisions of the National Football League. And the tilt of that football is exactly the same slope as the football on top of the Super Bowl trophy, the Vince Lombardi trophy. So that's like little trivia. I did hire the head of the intellectual property department. And for those of you joining online or here today, I promise that I will call him right after this presentation and say, oops. There are some other companies that are no longer here, although People Express is restarting out of Norfolk, Virginia right now. They just launched their first flight, which is really very interesting. Shearson Lehman Brothers, when I was there, I had 8 business cards in 7 years. Shearson Lehman Brothers, Shearson Lehman Hutton, Shearson Lehman American Express, Lehman Brothers. I don't know how many people remember, when E.F. Hutton talks, everybody listens. Do you remember that? Oh my gosh, that was part of our company too. And now I'm at Citrion. When I joined Citrion, it was called NewsGator. I don't know if any of you know that name. And then about 6 months in, we acquired a company that's in Oldenburg, Germany, which is, I'm told, a very nice village where everybody rides their bike no matter what the weather is. And this is a company that makes work better. And when we acquired Citrion, we took the name. Okay? So, does this look familiar to anybody? Back in the day, I used to have these 2 wire baskets, and actually the one that says in is much more organized than mine was. You see there's folders, kind of looks neat. And let's talk about how I got here. I pursued a career in HR. Back at People Express, it wasn't even called HR. There weren't majors or anything in HR like you have today. There was no certification, at least I didn't know about that. And, but I decided to pursue this career of working with people. I really had an interest in helping people in organizations to be more successful. So as I gained more and more experience, something occurred to me. I was spending less and less time with people. The more senior I got, the more paper I had. I see some people nodding. And I was handling way, way more paper than people. And today, if any of you are from the financial services industry, or if you're in the pharmaceutical industry and you're in any kind of regulated business, that amount of paper has grown exponentially. And it is paper like this, okay? Fast forward to when I was at Lehman Brothers, and I was asked to go to this required training for something called email. And I remember I said, oh my God, what am I going to use this stuff for? This is ridiculous. People are going to send me things. I'm going to answer them, send it back. It's ridiculous. Well, you know what happened. So this wire in basket became this electronic inbox, which had way, way more content, no more organization. If you have any people out there who have emails with like nice folders and colors and whatever, that's great. Kudos to you. That is not what my inbox looked like. So look at this. This is Gartner research. I don't know if any of you read their research, but back in 2008, they said something that really made me sick, that we in HR spend 70 to 80% of our time on non-value added work. How sad is that? I'm a person who hates to waste time. That is my biggest hot button. Don't put me somewhere and waste my time, because there's a limited amount of it. So to hear that I was wasting 70 to 80% of that in what I did every day, and we all spend a lot of time in the office or wherever our office may be. At that time, certainly I was in an office. So that's what today is still taking time. As I talk to colleagues and friends that I have in HR, we're all still lamenting about our ever-increasing to-do list. And there's a lot of administrative tasks, and there's a lot of trying to figure out, did that person just hit reply all because they did it by accident and this has nothing to do with me? And what version of the deck is on the email? Oh my gosh. So this is getting in the way of what we all really came here to do. We came to this kind of function in HR so that we could help people, we could develop people, we want to build cultures, we want to find great talent, we want to retain people. And I just remember always saying, gosh, there's got to be a better way. Maybe that comment has gone through your mind. The very good news is that technology can help. And right here, you're looking at some research, and this is also in your packet. The good news is that we're starting to make much needed investments in HR technology. So people are also targeting, as you can see at the top of this slide, administrative tasks. So a lot of that 70 to 80%. And I hope that this means that we're really finally getting out from that non-valued or, non-value added stage that we were in when Gartner published that research. So I consider myself incredibly fortunate right now because I am actually living in the future of work. And I've been trying to find this answer for a very, very long time. And again, as a client at JP Morgan, that's how I was introduced to NewsGator, really because people knew that I wanted to find this better way and that I was a real student of the future of work. That's actually how we came together. So, okay. Here is the Citrion commercial, okay? But, as Darren asked in the question before, there might be other people who are investigating this with other providers. The point is, we're the best, but there's a social component, and then there's another component that we'll talk about a little bit later, which is really routine administrative tasks. So one thing I really like about this slide, and I believe you all have this in your packets, when you look at this, this reminds me of my entire life. I use my little device for really everything. I don't go to a restaurant unless I see what people have said about it. So I booked my travel reservations here. My kids' calendar is here. My email for people who don't work in the amazing environment that I work in social. And the most important thing that I have on here is my fully loaded Starbucks card. Okay? So whether it's this, or I have the new mini iPad, or I have my laptop that's in my purse, and whatever brand it is, iPhone, Android, or whatever, this is how we live our lives outside of work, right? So why does that matter to us? I'm going to give you some very quick stories that I really hope that you'll enjoy. The first is one that my colleague Paul knows very well. We have a client that's a very well-known financial firm, and the CAO had this extraordinary intern for the summer. It was an MBA intern. And at the end of the summer, they have their kind of, exit, wrap up, how was the summer conversation. And the CAO says, I have great news. We think you are awesome, and we really want you to work here. And the intern, very humble, very gracious, says, that is such a nice offer. I'm honored, I'm flattered, but I'm not going to be able to work with your company. And the CAO says, why not? And I think the quote was, I actually wrote it down, and everything, he figures out that this intern is saying, I want to be able to come to a company and I want to be able to really make impact. I want to be able to know what I'm doing. I want to really be able to connect with people in the organization. And from what I've seen so far this summer, I really can't do that well here versus some other places where my friends work or other places that I know. So the CAO takes that away. He thinks about it. He does a little bit of research. He probably did a good bit of tossing and turning because he really wanted this guy. And a little bit later, he calls him up and he says, I would like you to come to this company, and I'm going to put you in charge of a project, which in a nutshell is basically, how do we become the company that you would want to work for? And he quickly becomes the head of collaboration at that company. He's no longer at the company, but he's the head of collaboration at another company, I believe biotech, but all names of companies that you would know, and you'd know very well, and some very big companies. So that's his story. That's story number one. Second story is a personal story about someone who's my new friend, Chris. 2 years ago, I was at JP Morgan, and we really wanted this graduate from Duke. And we spend a lot of money at JP Morgan and so many other companies to go to Duke and show our stuff and get the best people and all those other schools, right? So this is an enormous, enormous effort for HR when it comes to on-campus recruiting, especially in banking and a lot of other, great industries. So we have this guy, we really want him from Duke. We bring him up to the investment bank in New York. He meets some people. I really want to kind of close with the guy. And he says, I've decided that I don't want to work in investment banking. And I said, what? We've spent a lot of time with you, and we really want you. And what he says to me is, I was not born to wear a tie and sit in a cubicle and follow a banker around and work 24 hours a day to do an 80-page deck of which they only use 5. Okay, that's a good point. So what are you going to do, Chris? And he says, I'm going to start my own company. And at 24, he is the CEO of 3 companies and has investors in the whole thing. One is a technology company. And what's very interesting is his mom is an entrepreneur. I think that's part of where he gets it. And she owns a healthcare company that's in Florida. And it's like a laboratory, privately owned company. So Quest would be probably the biggest on the public side, okay? So they're a private side, a little smaller, but they just acquired a company. So the mom says, Chris, I really want you to come into the business. I am done and I'm ready to retire, and it's time for you to put this company where we need it to be and take over. And he goes, okay, cool, I'll do that. I need to just hire one person that I really want to work with. It's this woman that I know that we were classmates at Duke, and she's really awesome, and I'm going to get her to come down here and move to Miami. Well, where was she? Goldman Sachs. She had the dream job right? That we all think it is, to get hired out of Duke and go have this job, make money, and be at Goldman Sachs. And she quits her job and she moves to Miami. And she's going to be Chris's CFO. She's 24. Okay, so that's what's happening. All right, let's figure out, just go back for 1 second. Let's talk about how work evolved. Thousands of years ago, right? Work was survival. You went out and you hunted things and you gathered things and you came back and you just ate with your family, and then there was no sun and I guess you slept. Fast forward to the industrial age, industrial revolution, we figured out if we had this network of all these people, we could come together, put our hands together, we could build machines, and we could make amazing things like cars, okay? Then this digital revolution happened. Then now we were knowledge workers, and we had the internet, and your boss gave you a BlackBerry, and you felt so special, didn't you? And then she started emailing you in the middle of the night because she was in Asia, and it was your middle of your night. And then your work, the time distance and the physical distance and separation, you know, when you were in the industrial age, you would go to work. You'd make the cars, and then you would come home, right? But once the digital revolution started, the separation kind of went away. Now we're in this, what we call the network of hearts. Okay, so again, when I'm on my device and I'm looking at my social network, which so many of you are looking at your social media today, I checked on all of you, you're liking things, you're commenting on things, you're sharing things, right? And this idea of the network is now really coming into your workplace. The line is blurring. So the physical limitation and separation is going away, so is the emotional separation. And certainly the time element is no more. In fact, do any of you read research from the Corporate Executive Board? Many of you might be members. So this idea of networks has crept into the latest research from the Corporate Executive Board. So they asked the CEOs, what is it that is really going to bring breakthrough performance into your organization? And in a nutshell, here's what they say. Breakthrough performance is achieved by developing enterprise contributors. That's highly engaged people who not only perform at their best, but they help everyone else to be better. Individual contribution plus network contribution really equals better enterprise contribution. That's the latest research. So here we are. We're in the future, right now. And hopefully everything that I just said sets the stage for really talking about a day in the life of Nancy Gill. Okay? Hopefully you find this interesting. What I've done, there's a lot of slides here, and it's because I really wanted to show you. A lot of people ask me, like, what does this look like? What are you talking about? And judging by the polling results earlier, this will probably be new to quite a few of you. So I'm going to talk about three aspects of social. There's the social workplace, there's innovation, and then there's also corporate communications, internal communications. So first, in terms of a social workplace, think about social like this. This is about connecting. This is about all of us talking to each other. And it's like we do on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever. This is really, and you know, think about it. How many of your organizations have taken out layers and layers of people in the last 10 years, 20 years, right? I remember, oh gosh, at Lehman Brothers, one of those years, it was October, and I didn't lay people off. That's incredible, right? So what has to happen is now, you know, in an investment bank, you're the rainmaker, and you have all these people around who do your schedule, they read your email for you, they do all that stuff. Gone are those days. Now you have to do it yourself, and it is all about connecting with each other and talking to each other directly more and more. And in a social workplace, this is really the essence. And my friend that I met who had a really good conversation about email, they were out there talking about how do you get your work done if you have the social stuff, you got to look at the Twitter thing, plus you've got the thousands of emails and everything else. Well, this is where I work right now. So what you see in front of you is my social workspace. And I have it set up and customized for me, really based on the things that I need to know and people I need to talk to in order to do my job well. What you don't see here is the fact that behind all of this, I actually have collaborative technology. This is collaborative technology where all of our documents are shared. Okay, so I don't have an inbox right now, and it feels great. Okay, I mean, I have one if you guys want to email me, but in Citrion, this is where I do my work. And gone are the thousands of emails that don't relate to me. Because of what's in the background and all my documents and my reference materials and everything else, I don't have to worry about the dreaded version control. Like, which version of the slides am I looking at today? There is one, okay? And all of the people who are involved have collaborated on it. I'm going to give you an example of how this works for me. The CEO, who's Daniel Kraft, whose picture's up here, by the way, we call this working out loud. So we're all talking all the time. And we put a hashtag in front of it, if some of you are familiar with what a hashtag is. When we're talking about how we work out loud, we post something and we say, here we go, this is what I'm doing today. The CEO starts a conversation in what's called an activity stream, and he's talking about the fact that he's just posted slides for our internal company meeting that's going to happen tomorrow. And people start commenting, I love this culture, it's great, we see the slides before, we're so open, this is awesome. And then somebody says something about new people, like, this is great, do new people know how to get here, do they know what this all means? And then somebody else says, we should think about how we onboard our employees, we could probably do better. I jump in and I go, who wants to talk about onboarding? That's a good idea. And within a day, we had 8 people from around the world who said, I want to get involved in making onboarding better. And we started what's called a community of people who wanted to make onboarding better. We worked for 2 weeks together, this onboarding initiative community, and 2 weeks later, we had the newbie community. It was born. Basically, it was a place that all new people got put into immediately upon joining Citrion, and everything that they need, all their checklists, all their history of the company, our strategic framework, everything that you need when you're new is in the newbie community today. So we took everybody who was with Citrion less than a year, they all automatically went in, and if you join today, you're welcomed, think about it, by a bunch of other new people. You're in a community immediately. Now think about this. I really thought about it. When this happened, this was my first experience, I was like, whoa, let me think about all those other companies that I worked with and how long it would take me to totally overhaul the onboarding process. Yeah, I laughed too when I thought about that. Okay, let's quickly talk about social innovation. This is really, really important. You know, it's our nature, right? We want to be included. We want to find solutions to things. And when you think about social innovation and how companies grow, social is really the way to go. And McKinsey has even proven it, that if, their latest research says that if you have a socially enabled innovation capability in your organization, those processes produce 28% more successful innovations, okay? And I put this slide up here because I love the pictures, but think about basic human nature. We like to come together. We like to share things. And we love to be inspired, right? When you go into social, that's exactly what you do. This is all about crowdsourcing. This is all about how to find the best ideas and to get everybody involved. So this is one thing I suggest that you look at in your organization. Do you use crowdsourcing for your new products? Do you go out to your clients and your customers and ask them what new products you should develop? Check that out. If you're a nonprofit, are you raising funds through crowdsourcing? How are you asking your employees is my question. Just remember that the innovation can really happen at any moment, in any place, which is why you want to have all of this capability on your phone. So when you're in the supermarket and you have an idea, you can put it in there. Last thing, corporate communication. I'm going to go through this very quickly, and I'm happy to answer your questions about this. But I think that you know that if you want to put something out in your corporation today, you've got to go to marketing and corporate communications and get the thing approved and everything else. What I do is I just post in an activity stream, and I am able to use this. I could decide who's getting the message, what time of day, and I just post it like that. And, oh, sorry, Here's some more logos. We have permission to use every one of these. These are companies that we work with today. This is a small slice of them that are using the social. And I just want to add very quickly what we've recently added in is HR self-service, manager self-service, and what this all can turn into in the end is one place that everybody in your organization can do absolutely everything that they need to do. Sounds pretty incredible, right? HR service centers, HR portals. And the one thing I really want to end with today is that we are social with our customers too. So if you become a customer, you're basically going to be talking to all of our other customers and all of us all of the time to really kind of solidify your needs and come up with your own solutions. So I'm sure you have many, many questions, but we're not going to take them right now. We're going to turn everything over to the angel. The first one, Celia, my new friend, and enjoy the rest of the presentation. I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to your questions in a little while. Thanks.
Francine is a product of the Bronx who has discovered joy in New Jersey. She was in HR the first 7 years of her career. She's a graduate of Cornell's School of Industrial Relations, and then went to law school at Rutgers. And so she has a very good background for today's, she understands the issues here.
Thank you. I didn't even say anything yet. Good morning, everyone. I really liked Darren's analogy of the angel and the devil. I mean, I'm not sure I'm very often called an angel, but it's interesting because Nancy told you about all the fun people can have on social media and how wonderful it is, and she made you laugh, and I don't know that I'm going to do that. And, I am the negative version of the angel. I'm the person who says, no, you can't do that. No, that's not right. And you should, that's what the angel and the devil on your shoulder is. The devil tells you to do all the fun, good stuff that maybe is not the best for you. The angel's like, no. That's exactly my role here today. And I'm not going to make you laugh, probably. I'm going to probably scare you to death, but that's what lawyers are supposed to do. So I thought about an introductory question for all of you, and that is, how many of your organizations have a Facebook page? Lots of you. Okay. Good, I wanted to know that. And for those of you whose organizations don't have a Facebook page, I suggest that you check Facebook, because you probably do, because Facebook creates them for you. And before my own law firm decided to have a Facebook page, we realized that we already had one, including our logo, because unauthorized use of logos is prevalent. And so we got our intellectual, sorry, I had to joke with her. We had to, I did make you laugh at least once. We did have to write to Facebook a nasty letter from one of our intellectual property lawyers saying, what are you doing using our logo, creating a page that suggests that this is our page, and you need to not do that, and they immediately took it down. So that's why I would encourage all of you to look. But I have been traveling the country for the last 5 years or so, talking about the evils of social media. And the social media that I'm talking about is not necessarily what Nancy's talking about. I'm talking about Facebook and Twitter and all of the very prevalent uses of social media. Facebook has over 1 billion users now, out of somebody's dorm room in Harvard to 1 billion users. Certainly it's prevalent in the world. Let me make sure we're on this right slide here. So it's prevalent, and I am not, and again, I was traveling the country like Chicken Little. The sky is falling, the sky is falling. Yes, everybody's getting involved. Everybody thinks it's so wonderful. And social media is wonderful and has a place, but we have to also understand the downsides. So social media is very prevalent everywhere, but including in the workplace, there are studies that suggest that your employees are spending up to 4 hours a day at work looking at social media. for non-business purposes, checking their Facebook page, tweeting about, their favorite sports team, whatever else. So at the very least, it's an issue of productivity. Whether you're letting them do it on your computers or they're doing it on their smartphones, they're doing it. And I saw that a lot of you actually do allow your employees to use social media on your computers. And, a lot of you do it because young people expect it and you don't want to be overly controlling of your employees. But certainly there may come some liability with that, and we'll talk about it as my presentation goes by. And by the way, a 20-minute presentation is just the tip of the iceberg on these issues, certainly. But the employer's response to issues has been slow. Indeed, a significant percentage of you don't even yet have a social media policy, and I think you need to really think hard about that and put one in place as soon as possible. And unfortunately, too many entities out there just go on the internet and Google social media policy and they put one in place. And I saw probably just a small percentage of you were confident that your policies were legally sound, and that's probably good because the law has been developing so quickly as to what you can and cannot have in your social media policy. And if you haven't revised your social media policy probably in the last 6 months, it's probably illegal and out of date. Okay? So we'll talk more about that in a minute too. There's significant liability under a whole host of employment laws, and you'll see in the next couple of slides, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You're damned if you scrutinize what people do on social media and take action that you shouldn't, and you're damned if you don't scrutinize what your employees do and don't take action when you should. And also there are very large consequences of your employees' improper social media use, including the disclosure of all your confidential information and your inability to perhaps enforce those confidentiality and non-compete agreements that you were asked about in the survey. So let's talk about the damned if you do, you damned if you don't. I will go over these very briefly, and then I have a whole bunch of problems for group discussion or just problems that show how these play out. You're damned if you do take action against employees for what's known as their protected concerted activity. How many of you have unionized operations? Okay, not many of you, because unionization has gotten smaller, which is my point. There is an entity, a governmental entity, the National Labor Relations Board, that is charged with overseeing the National Labor Relations Act. And traditionally, most employers have said, well, I don't have to worry about the National Labor Relations Board, I don't have a union. The National Labor Relations Board has realized that, maybe our existence is in jeopardy since the percentage of employees in the workplace who are unionized is very small. We better get our act together and get involved in non-unionized workplaces. And the National Labor Relations Act does apply to non-union employers. Your employees have the right to band together for their collective good, especially when it comes to terms and conditions of employment. So if you do anything to your employees that penalizes them for doing this, you will violate the National Labor Relations Act, whether you have a union or not. Depending upon how your policies are written, you may be violating your employees' right to engage in protected concerted activity as well. And I'll show you that in these little scenarios that I'm going to have for you. Studies show that everybody discloses a lot more information through electronics and computer things, the internet, email, and social media, than they ever would in person in talking to someone or certainly writing things down. So they are disclosing all the very personal details of their lives. And if they do not have their security settings set appropriately, and studies show that the majority of people on social media have absolutely no idea how to set their security settings. And that's why I love this. People put on their Facebook page, I'm going to Europe for 2 weeks on vacation. I'm so excited. We're leaving tomorrow. And then what do they find when they get home? That's right, that their house was burglarized because they told 1 billion people that they're not going to be home for the next 2 weeks. And again, people don't get it, that you're telling 1 billion people all these very personal details about your life, and again, you're not just doing it to your friends if you didn't set your security settings. So, and again, I am sure a number of managers in your organizations are friending their subordinates, which is a big, big mistake, because they find out information that they don't want to know. And if they start taking action based on that information, it's going to be illegal discrimination or retaliation. They may now know that an employee is gay. They may now know that an employee is disabled. They may now know a myriad of other things that fall into the legally protected classifications. And how do you unring the bell is what I ask. Once you know that, how do you say, no, but I didn't make the decision based on that? It makes it that much more difficult. The Fair Credit Reporting Act, I don't know if you have an intricate knowledge of this law, but when you use third-party consumer reporting agencies to do background checks on your employees, you have to give your employees notice and get their consent. So how many of you look at somebody's Facebook page publicly before you hire them? Okay, a very small percentage of you, but some. We're going to talk about that. If you have your background check agency do it, if you didn't get the notice and consent, that's a violation of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And I'll tell you how to do that better if you're already doing it. There's state laws prohibiting password disclosure. New York's not one of them yet, but shortly probably will be. And there's both federal and state stored communications laws that basically say that you cannot go somewhere that you're not authorized to go. So you can't force your employees to hand over their password and username so that you can get into their social media accounts and look. You can't force your employees, potentially, depending upon the situation, to show me stuff on your or someone else's protected, secured social media accounts. Especially in New York, there's an off-duty conduct law that you can't necessarily hold people's off-duty legal conduct against them unless it's business related and you have a justifications, privacy, free speech rights. So this is when you do something and you're damned for it. And now when you don't, harassment. You all know that the standard, or one of the many standards for liability under harassment law, when employees harass each other, is that you knew or should have known and didn't do anything about it. So again, should you know that your employees are harassing each other on a medium that 1 billion people have access to, theoretically? And we'll see, again, more examples of this. Negligent hiring or retention, you continue to employ somebody that you know is a danger of some sort. Wage and hour violations, again, when Nancy was talking about, the time people work get blurred because they're engaged, and I'm like, wage and hour violation, wage and hour violation. Depending upon whether they're exempt, and probably a lot of the people that Nancy works with are exempt from overtime, but there are lots of people in the world who are not, and according to our President Obama, he wants to make more people non-exempt from overtime, so that scares me. Are your employees tweeting on your behalf? Are they putting things on your Facebook page that are beneficial to you on their off time, and should they be paid for that? Endorsement and defamation issues. How many of you have a policy that says only human resources shall provide references for our employees? As you should, but people are doing it on LinkedIn every day, right? And do you have a policy that says they can't do that? Did you make it clear to them, and oh, by the way, this applies to LinkedIn as well? So a lot of these issues. Disclosure of confidential information and resulting inability to enforce confidentiality non-compete agreements. I was in human resources for a decent amount of time, and very often human resources is the last to know about a lot of things, right? And you may have sales and marketing departments, you may have research and development departments, you may have all these departments who are full speed ahead, social media, this is great. We're getting free advertising, we're interacting with our customers, this is great. Until all your confidential information walks out the door. Twitter is my favorite. And I'm like probably the opposite of Nancy. Okay, social media is evil, but, but how can we use it to our advantage? Okay, you know what? You go to your competitor's Twitter account and see who's following them. And that's your target audience for your new clients. Their customer lists are right there. Or link in with somebody who's your competitor, and if they're silly enough to say, oh, isn't this nice? Yeah, I'll link in with this person, and then you could see who their contacts are. But nobody thinks about this? Why is it just the angel on your shoulder who says, hello? But this is reality. And I'll give you, again, another one of those examples when we walk through them. But let's go through these, because these are the application of all of those tapping on the shoulder as the angel saying, beware. Now, this is the protected concerted activity. During meetings, Joe has been very vocal about his dissatisfaction with the company's reduction of wages and benefits during the economic downturn. We talked about how the economy's not been good. We've had to downsize. Again, we may have had to not give raises. We may have had to make people contribute more to benefits, and this is common. In addition to his being vocal about those things, he also has been very vocal about supervisors' treatment of employees in the department. Other employees, to some extent, have voiced their agreement during such meetings. Karen, an employee who wants to be promoted, and the mole, because there's always a mole when it comes to social media stuff, which is a good thing, informs her supervisor about Joe's rants on Facebook, including that the supervisors are incompetent, evil crooks. When the manager asks Karen to open her Facebook account so he could see the posts, she hesitates, but then reluctantly does so. Joe is then discharged for his violation of the company's courtesy and disparagement policies. Now, there's several issues here. First of all, the National Labor Relations Board will have a problem with your policies on courtesy, respect, and professionalism in the workplace, because that deters employees from talking about their concerns about their terms and conditions of employment. They may not know that that's what they can do, and so you can't expect people to be professional at work. You can't expect them to be courteous at work. You can't require that. What? And in the last year or two, people have been reinstated with back pay for their doing things that were not courteous or respectful or professional. And they can call their supervisors evil, crooks, or mentally ill. And that's okay. Now, most supervisors, if they ever got brought to what? Fire them. That's insubordination, that's disparagement, how dare they? They're affecting the company's image. Now, you have the word image in your social media policy, it's probably illegal. If you have the word disparagement in your social media policy, it's probably illegal. Don't get me started on me writing social media policies, and I wrote this beautiful policy like 2 years ago, and ever since then, I've had to gotta scratch that part off, gotta scratch that part off, because the National Labor Relations Board has come out with all these cases. Now, so why? Because Joe's talking about issues that pertain to the workplace, terms and conditions of employment, treatment of employees by supervisors, and it's grown out of meetings in the workplace. Other employees agree. So let's say we look at his Facebook page and other employees like it and what he's saying. Protected concerted activity, they're banding together for their collective good. Now, if Joe was just ranting about me, that's an individual gripe and that's not protected. But once it becomes arguably having to do with other employees as well, that's a problem. We also have another problem in here, and that's whether you have a law in your state or not. In New Jersey, within the last year, there was one of these laws passed on not asking for passwords or forcing people to give access to their social media accounts under most circumstances. But this thing about the supervisor asking Karen, hey, can I see this? Did she agree to do it or not? Guess what? There was a case on this that was very similar. The mole comes forward, and then, oh, okay, can I see it? Yeah, okay, and shows. And then whenever all hell breaks loose and people get fired, and they're like, what the heck did you tell them for? She's like, they made me. I thought I'd be fired if I didn't. Violation of the federal stored communications law. You coerced somebody into giving you access to a protected account. So, geez, we think this is all reasonable, right? This person gets reinstated with back pay. Next one. Are you all familiar with GINA? That's another law. I'm running around like the sky is falling and nobody's paying attention because we don't have genetic information about our employees, do we? Yeah, you do. Because you have lots of information about their family members' physical and mental issues, and injuries and illnesses. And it's not necessarily just my mother has breast cancer, it's my stepdaughter has the chicken pox. That's genetic information as well, which is ridiculous. But in any event, GINA was the first law that got passed after the age of social media. And the EEOC has actually given us some guidance on this. And the very bad thing about GINA is it's not just that if you make decisions based on genetic information, you're liable. If you ask for genetic information, you're liable, okay? So let me give you this example, and then we'll talk more about it. Ed manages several employees. Ed has friended a number of them on Facebook, but does not actively access the site. On a rainy Saturday, that's the rainy Saturday Facebook user, as I call them, the people who dabble. Ed checks his Facebook page and sees a number of posts by Janet describing her mother's ongoing battle with breast cancer. Janet also posted that although she currently does not have breast cancer, she's going to be tested to see if she's genetically predisposed to the disease. Think Angelina Jolie, right? Ed now checks Facebook more regularly to monitor the situation. After several checks over a month period, Ed sees that Janet is predisposed to the disease and is considering a mastectomy to reduce her risks. Concerned that Janet will need a lengthy leave of absence, Ed recommends that Janet be included in an upcoming reduction in force. Now, is this out of the realm of possibility? So, okay, so if he made the decision to let's lay her off, that's definitely a big, big problem, right? But the fact that he kept going back to his Facebook page to monitor the situation, the EEOC has said is a violation. Okay? So, and again, he would not have known any of this but for friending Janet at some point. And very often we forget who we friended, especially when we have 500 friends, right? So, like, that's the problem. All this information is getting communicated that really people shouldn't know. And once you know it, you're going to be charged with using it and using it illegally a lot of the time. All right, so a lot of you said that you look at Facebook before you hire somebody, and let's say you used a background check company to do it. The hiring manager is informed by the background check company that Facebook postings of an applicant for a manager position demonstrate racial bias, recreational drug use, and sexual promiscuity, and denies employment to the applicant as a result. Do you think that's a problem? Why? Is that race, sex, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, age, disability, marital status, color? Those are none of the necessarily protected classifications, right? I might not hire this person if we got the notice and consent to the background check. Do we want our managers to be racially biased? Do we want them to be druggies? No. And drug use is not protected, and that's not, legal activity. Now, to the extent that some of you are looking at social media before you hire people, I hope it's not the hiring manager who does this look. Because then they see, oops, they're gay, oops, they're disabled, oops, they're older, oops, they're whatever. You should have someone who is not the hiring manager take a look and funnel the job-related things to the person who's making the decision. Insulate the decision maker from seeing the stuff that they shouldn't be seeing is what's important. Next one, an employee complains that a male coworker has been posting what she considers to be ongoing sexually harassing comments about her on his Facebook page. There was the office Casanova. He used to rate all the female coworkers sexually because he was sleeping with many of them. And once they found out, obviously, they were really mad. In reviewing the postings she provides, you discover that her manager was a friend of the accused harasser. Now, what does that mean? Her manager knows that she's being harassed theoretically because he's seeing the posts as well. Liability if she realizes this, right? Because he was sleeping with many of them. And once they found out, obviously, they were really mad. In reviewing the postings she provides, you discover that her manager was a friend of the accused harasser. Now, what does that mean? Her manager knows that she's being harassed theoretically because he's seeing the posts as well. Liability if she realizes this, right? Manager knows that the truck driver's Facebook postings make constant references to excessive binge drinking. Negligent retention. Okay, when that person ultimately has a really bad accident and kills someone, obviously, we're going to be liable for that because we've seen the postings, and we should have done something to potentially prevent that. You just received a lawyer letter stating that a new employee has been a very vocal fan on your company's Facebook page, that she has allegedly made some very serious false statements about the safety of the products of her former employer, a competitor, and that company has experienced a large decrease in business as a result. Hopefully you've heard of the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. They are the entity that is in charge of false advertising. They put out guidance on social media and said that if your employees get on social media and give a good review of your products or services, but don't say that they're employed by you, that's false advertising, even if you didn't tell them to do it. So you need to have a policy in place that tells people, you know, you need to tell people. Okay, so let's say I work for Pepsi, and I did the Coke Pepsi test. And Pepsi's really so much better, but I didn't tell you that I worked for Pepsi. Wouldn't that skew your view on my opinion if you knew I worked for Pepsi? Basically, that's the issue. But again, defamation issues, false advertising issues, very real. Your responsibility, even though one of your employees is off doing it on their own. Unbeknownst to you, the director of sales and marketing had previously required all sales representatives to open personal LinkedIn accounts and connect with their customers. A sales representative who is about to be discharged is linked in with most of the company's largest customers. And there goes your customer list. And when they update their LinkedIn page about where they now work, now all of your customers may go to that organization. Despite confidentiality agreement, despite a non-compete agreement, because you made them do it. You made that information not confidential anymore. So how are you going to say it's confidential now? And it's a personal LinkedIn account, which makes it worse. You know, create professional ones that you get to keep when they leave, and contractually they say, yeah, I agree to this. We're in the middle of a contentious disability discrimination lawsuit with a former employee who claims that the company failed to accommodate his need for additional medical leave. A coworker brings you screenshots of what she saw on Facebook, recent pictures of the former employee strenuously working on an addition to his home, a fact suggesting that he's not really disabled. Woohoo! There's that good part of being an angel. You know, use evil social media to your advantage. Every case now that I have during discovery, I ask for social media posts because there's gold in them there hills. Because I had a sexual harassment claim where the alleged victim was a porn star. So really, when the manager made that one little comment, that was really so upsetting to you when you're a porn star. But this, and this is the epitome. This happens all the time. I was so emotionally distraught and depressed because they fired me, and they're like, you know, drinking with a smile and traveling, and really, you're so emotionally distraught. All right, so takeaways. I mean, I think these are all pretty self-explanatory, and I think, you know, that they're giving me the hook here that I need, that my time is done, and certainly, hopefully, you'll have questions for me as well, and we're going to get to that point right now, I believe.
You can't make this stuff up, can you? Okay, so let's take some questions. We have about 10 minutes left. We have a firm policy. We end on time. So let's take 2 or 3 questions. And who wants to start? Okay, right down over here.
Hi, thank you both for the presentations. So Nancy, my question is for you. Regarding the Citron platform, do you enable, how do you enable things like virtual meetings or or managing virtual workforces through that? Because that's a growing issue for a lot of employers. And particularly in terms of meetings, brainstorming meetings for those of us that have innovation responsibilities.
Great question. Thank you. So first of all, we do a lot with video conferencing. So we are actually, the social platform is connected to a great partner. We are a partner of Microsoft, and we actually use Microsoft Link for all of our telephony and video conferencing. But what's happening in the social community, and we do have people really all over the place, the meetings are happening virtually in the social community. So, again, if I want to talk about onboarding, I go into that onboarding community. If I want to have a meeting with Paul and 5 other people, I can do what's called an @target. If you're familiar with with Twitter, you can target somebody, and then it's like they're getting a direct message, and that can be either private or out in the open. So if it's out in the open and I'm planning 5 people to talk about a discussion, everybody else can jump in. Does that answer your question? The brainstorming, so what you saw before, and I'm sorry I had to go through it quickly because I ran out of time, but it's the innovation solution, as we call it, where everybody is, that's really ideation, and it's very spontaneous and very focused. So you saw something that I posted in corporate communications about the travel policy, and if you read the fine print on that, I don't know if you can in the packet that you have, that was a policy that was invented by a virtual team of people. The idea to refresh the travel policy came from what's called an idea campaign in our innovation solution on our platform. So the brainstorming is happening through the community and through the technology. Then we decide, okay, we're going to do that travel policy, and then anybody who wants to work on it gets involved and on board. Just one note on the travel policy, that policy was actually done by that team in about a week. We posted it for the entire company, and we had a lot of ideas, and version 2 went up within 24 hours. So it's really superhuman agility, getting all the ideas, getting all the brains around the table, and then actually making a decision and doing something. I hope that helps.
Okay, another question? There's one down here. There's a.
No. Also for you, Nancy, just a question about the adoption of the system into large organizations. What are some of the keys for successful adoption and integration into the culture of an organization for a system that you're describing?
Well, I'm glad you said culture, because it is culture change. It is really culture changing, and we have something that we call the adoption framework. So we actually go into these companies and we work with the teams to really change the culture of the organization. Paul can certainly tell you more about it after we're done, but there is a whole framework about how you start this in your company. And some people will start it in pockets and pilot it, then it'll grow. But there is a very systematic, and a lot of companies I'm finding have started doing this because they needed a really breakthrough change in their organization. So they were going to change the culture and reinvent the organization. That's certainly the case with Kraft Foods as one example you saw up there. And I recently was talking with them, and that was what was driving it. They were reinventing their company for their employees.
And we'll take one more question now, and I'm sure we can get these ladies to stay afterwards for those of you who don't get your questions answered, so please come on up and see us. But last question there.
In terms of the disparaging courtesy policy and social media, do you have any suggestions on what we can legally do?
Yes. And then that's only one example. And I'll get to your answer in a second. The other issue is, you have to keep confidential information confidential. But even that could be problematic if you don't tell them what confidential information is. For instance, so many companies wrongfully tell their employees or hold them accountable when they do a certain thing, and that is to talk about their compensation. Oh no, you're not supposed to talk about your compensation to other people. Well, you can't tell them that. That's not confidential. The National Labor Relations Board will, again, reinstate and give back pay to that person, because employees have the right to say, how much do you make? Well, I think the men are getting paid more, Nancy. We need to, so your employees have the right to talk about some things that you may perceive to be confidential, so you have to give them examples. All right, you work for Pepsi, you can't give out the formula. Or our customer lists, or what we're doing, like our marketing plans into the future. So if you give examples, same thing, disparagement. You can't say anything knowingly false about our competitors. Again, the competitors is not necessarily going to be protected concerted activity, because again, that's not terms and conditions of employment. Customers are, though. One of the cases was a whole bunch of restaurant employees saying, oh, that regular doesn't tip very well. And, and they're doing it very publicly, or our customers are rude. So if you're harassing, if you threaten, if you can give examples of the more extreme type of behavior that would be prohibited. But yeah, there's ways of getting around it. So I would suggest that if you don't have a good lawyer that works with you, I'd be happy to work with you. But got to get my little sales in here. But really, a lot of lawyers don't. First of all, I do labor law. I do still work with unions, and we're a dying breed. I mean, I do the employment side too, but there's not a lot of labor lawyers out there anymore. And if you just go to an employment lawyer, or if you go to an intellectual property lawyer to get your social media policy, or a technology lawyer to get your social media policy, they're not necessarily going to know about the board, the National Labor Relations Board stuff. So I want to make sure that you go to the right lawyers to make sure the cutting edge legal issues are addressed, because they're all in the area of labor law, even if you don't have unions. And that's where, again, every month there's a different change based on a new case or some new guidance that comes out. But yeah, when you give more specific detail about things that you know are defensible, that's generally when your policies are better. And you need to have a little disclaimer at the bottom, although the board doesn't recognize it all the time, that says nothing herein is intended to infringe upon employees' right to engage in protected concerted activity, which means that you can talk badly about your supervisors and, talk about your terms and conditions of employment. I don't know if I'd go that far, but the board wants you to go that far, because employees don't necessarily know what protected concerted activity is. So your disclaimer doesn't mean anything if they don't understand it.
Darren, I'm going to turn this meeting back to you to wrap us up. And please, if you want to talk to these ladies, stick around a little bit, and Darren will wrap us up.
Can we get one more round of applause for these terrific speakers?
Thank you.
Please remember to turn in your blue forms and hand back the polling devices to the ushers. I just want to thank everybody for coming. Wish everybody a great summer. We'll see you in September, and go USA Soccer. Thanks very much.
That was great.